Bill Maher sat down with Fareed Zakaria of CNN, and he explains what he thinks of Trump voters.
Whatever happens with this election, the big question I think we are all still trying to puzzle is how Trump, why Trump? What is your explanation as to why Donald Trump erupted onto the political scene the way he did?
Well, you have to look at the people who voted for him. I mean, it's depressing to think that you share the country with so many people who you share nothing with. Donald Trump is a reflection. And what we learned is that there's a lot of vulgar, tacky, racist people in this country, more than I thought. I knew there was some. But it's the proverbial lifting up of a rock. And what we found when we lifted it up was a basket of deplorables. And I know they hate that term, but if the basket fits, and it does.
There are a lot of people who talk about the economic anxiety, the dislocation, the pain. In your last monologue, you don't buy that.
Well, I mean, we found out it was a myth. I mean, the typical Trump voter in the primaries made, I think, $72,000. They're not hurting economically like they say they are. No more likely to be hurt by trade or immigration. No more likely to be out of work. The base problem is that they live in this fact-free bubble.
So he's making a classic Democratic argument at this point, basically saying, no, don't talk about, these people suffering. Don't talk about them being victims. Don't talk about the economic anxiety. Don't talk about the changing economy. Don't talk about any of that stuff. Call it out for what it is. They are racists. They are bigots. They have a disgusting, grotesque philosophy, an outlook on the world. And they don't care about facts. They don't care about reality. And stop pussyfooting around it. Just call it out for what it is. That's what it is. Now, just like with Paul Krugman, just like with others who have made similar arguments, I don't fully agree here. Now, don't get me wrong. Do I think there are some, if not many, Trump voters who are, when it boils down to it, just your run-of-the-mill bigot? And, person who does have a terrible philosophy and outlook on the world, and they want to implement that. Yes. So he's partly right. Believe me, you're never going to get me to say about the Republican Party that they don't live in an alternate reality. They most definitely do. I mean, how many stories have we covered that basically prove that? So yes, that is true. But he's downplaying the other very important part, and that really annoys me about this election, is that you have many people in the Democratic Party and many people who are Democratic loyalists. It's a very convenient argument for them to just say, well, look, everybody who is for Trump is just a bad person. So therefore, I don't have to dig any deeper. I don't have to think any more about it because they're just bad people. So whatever tactics I want to use against them, whatever arguments I want to use against them, it's good by definition because they have it coming because they're bad people. And that's the argument that they use, and it makes them feel good about themselves, and it makes them able to put down their political enemies. But they are overlooking a real part of the picture. A lot of these people are hurting. Not all of them, and it is true, I looked it up, that the average Trump voter does make $72,000 a year, which is more than I thought. But for the people, or some of the people who are on the lower end of that, you can go talk to them. They're out there. It is true that some of them say, look, my job was shipped to China. My job was shipped to Mexico. My job was, taken away from me. There's been a race to the bottom. Yes, NAFTA has outsourced jobs. Yes, the TPP will outsource more jobs. They can't lay it out in all this detail, but they feel it. They say the World Trade Organization has been a problem. The Republican Party has abandoned these people long ago, and the neoliberals within the Democratic Party are also more than willing to abandon these people to look out for Wall Street interests and corporate interests over the people. So you have no real representation of the workers. When you have no real representation of the workers in the establishment of the two parties, you're going to have people say anything but the establishment of the two parties. And Donald Trump certainly portrays himself as anti-establishment. Now, again, they're wrong in thinking that he is that, most likely, because, hey, the guy himself outsourced his own jobs to China and Mexico and Turkey, and there's countless stories of him willing to play ball, saying, hey, Jeb is a puppet for having this billionaire give him money, and then he took money from that exact same billionaire, Woody Johnson to be specific. So he's not the solution, but he plays the role of the solution effectively. And you, Bill Maher, and other Democratic loyalists are not willing to acknowledge part of the thing that's propelling him and making him popular. So again, you're not going to get disagreement from me that, yeah, some of his followers are just deplorable. So just to give you some numbers here, it's 65% of Trump voters who say Obama's a Muslim. He's not. And gee, I wonder why they think that. It's because Obama, he looks kind of foreign-like. So he's a Muslim. So, okay, that is, birthed in bigotry. I'm willing to call that deplorable because it's fucking deplorable. 59% think he's Kenyan. That is deplorable. That is bigotry. I agree with you. But what I'm saying is, can we acknowledge the other part of it, that neoliberalism has contributed to the race to the bottom, which then makes people turn to bad ideas for the solution? So Bill Clinton signed NAFTA. Bill Clinton signed the deregulation of Wall Street with the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, which repealed Glass-Steagall. Bill Clinton did welfare reform, which was terrible for poor people. So yes, you know what happens oftentimes? You make people economically desperate. When they become economically desperate, they look for answers. And many people turn to the wrong answers. And that's when you can really tap into the vein of bigotry and xenophobia and racism. I mean, think about it. If everybody's doing well in a society, it's hard to make people to have the racism bubble to the top and to overflow and to actually take have policies that are driven in a racist direction, because everybody's doing well. So why would you blame anybody for anything? You're doing pretty well. You don't need, those feelings might be latent, but they're not bubbling to the surface. As of right now, the bigotry and the xenophobia is bubbling to the surface, and one of the reasons for that is the economic anxiety. People feel like the country is moving beyond them. I mean, wages have been stagnant from the 1980s and onward. And yes, corporate profits have soared in that time frame. So people are net losing money, and the rich are getting richer. Economic inequality is getting worse. Congress has a 9% approval rating because they're so bought by corporations and billionaires. The Democrats are not the solution. The Republicans are not the solution. So people go, overturn the system and anything but what we have now. And you have a billionaire who comes along, an alleged billionaire who comes along, who exploits the anxieties and who mixes in flat-out racism, bigotry, and xenophobia with some economic populism. And that's a powerful message, not only in the U.S., but anywhere where times are rough, is, people go, oh, I don't have to look at, my failings through a broader macroeconomic picture. I can just blame the Muslims, blame the Mexicans, blame the immigrants, blame the dark-skinned people. So they give them an excuse. They give them a scapegoat. That doesn't mean the scapegoat is right. It means if you get rid of the economic anxiety, and if you had a government that actually represented the people and was a social democracy, there would still be racism, xenophobia, and bigotry, but it wouldn't be as much. It wouldn't be as prominent. It wouldn't be as many people, and you wouldn't be risking this nationalist far-right candidate gaining power. So again, I think there's a grain of truth in what Maher is saying, but overall I do think he's too hard on Trump voters, because it's a too convenient of an explanation. Oh, they're all racist. Oh, they're all bigoted. Oh, they're all xenophobic. Instead of acknowledging that, no, maybe both parties bear some responsibility. Not equal responsibility, but they both bear some responsibility. And yeah, if the government was more responsive to the people, the extreme wouldn't rise up like this. And that's what's happening. Some of them, it doesn't matter what you do to try to change their mind. They're going to be bigoted. They're going to be extreme. They're going to be racist and xenophobic. But some of them, that's not the case. And I feel like he doesn't acknowledge that, because it's easier to just be rah-rah team blue and say, oh, Democrats are great and Republicans are bad and they're all racist. But that's a very lazy view on the world, and it's really not nuanced, and it's actually kind of sad for somebody as smart as Bill Maher.